Many countries are facing a debt crisis, but a bailout is coming from the Chinese Communist Party. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Chinese leader Xi Jinping talks a lot about this being a new era, an era controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And he is making good on that promise. I've talked a lot about China's Belt and Road Initiative, also known as One Belt, One Road to massive amounts of debt. It's a quote-unquote infrastructure investment initiative that has made dozens of countries around the world deeply dependent on the Chinese Communist Party. Wow. Can you imagine being deeply dependent on the CCP for financial reasons? Glad we here in America don't have that problem. One expert told the Financial Times, China wants to have the ear of governments where raw materials are located, or large markets, or strategic ports, or where there is access to shipping lanes. This can effectively cut off access to these countries for the US, meaning less and less global influence. Remember, this is the Chinese Communist Party's new era. And they want to be the ultimate influencers. Why does an evil regime have the same life goals as my cousin? But here's the thing about Chinese loans. They're incredibly secretive. Loans from the International Monetary Fund, for instance, are very transparent. You can see the details of the credit lines, debt relief, and restructuring programs, etc. Chinese loans are a complete black box. The details aren't even known to the citizens of each country that gets a loan. That's why the Chinese Communist Party likes to work with dictatorships. They too aren't big on transparency. Some people say I vilify the CCP a lot, but making people sign shady, vague contracts and then taking them for more than they bargained for is literally what the devil does. We should all be very concerned if Xi Jinping ever goes down to Georgia. But these shady loans are why it's so concerning that there's a new trend with Chinese lending. Recently, China has been giving tens of billions of dollars in secretive emergency loans to countries facing economic crises. I'll tell you more after this quick commercial break. Welcome back. For a long time now, the Chinese Communist Party has been giving out loans to poor developing countries. But lately, it seems the party is specifically targeting countries at risk of or in the middle of major financial crises. Researchers have found that the bulk of China's overseas lending, around 60%, is now to low-income countries that are currently mired in debt distress or at high risk of it. They're singling them out because they seem vulnerable and desperate. Oh, they're like every frat guy I knew back in college. Aid Data is a research lab that has the world's most comprehensive database on Chinese lending. It has data on loans from more than 300 Chinese government institutions and state-owned entities to 165 low- and middle-income countries. And what they found is pretty disturbing. Over the past several years, China has doled out tens of billions of dollars in emergency loans to countries like Venezuela, Ecuador, Angola, Laos, Suriname, Belarus, Egypt, Mongolia, and Ukraine. But the biggest three have been Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Argentina. Those three alone accounted for almost $33 billion in emergency loans. Many of the countries getting these emergency loans already have Belt and Road infrastructure loans from China. And analysts say China is giving emergency loans to keep these countries from defaulting on their previous loans. Sri Lanka, in particular, is doing really badly. The Prime Minister recently said the country was bankrupt. There's been massive protests there since the beginning of the year. I'd show you the footage, but YouTube would demonetize us. And then, China would probably swoop in and try and give us a loan. The world's poorest countries owe a lot of money to China. Nearly 70% of the world's poorest countries will dole out about $53 billion this year to repay debts, and more than a quarter of that is to China. These countries are struggling to repay those Chinese loans. Then global events like the current inflation crisis makes things worse. China's loans to countries in economic distress have gone up dramatically, And you can see where the financial crisis in Venezuela, the COVID pandemic, and more recently the Russia-Ukraine war helped propel it. The thing is, for many of these countries, Chinese loans might just be making things worse. The attraction of Chinese loans is that they have no strings attached, at least in terms of rule of law or transparency. That makes Chinese loans very attractive to dictators. Unfortunately, this also prevents any kind of reform that would actually solve the country's economic problems. According to Bradley Parks, the executive director of Aid Data, when Beijing acts as an alternative lender of last resort and bails out a distressed sovereign without requiring economic policy discipline or pursuing a coordinated debt rescheduling with major creditors, it effectively kicks the can down the road and leaves it to others to solve the underlying solvency problem. Again, look at Sri Lanka. People have been talking about their debt crisis for years, but because they kept getting Chinese money, things only got worse. Now reforms will only be harder and more painful. They should have listened to that old expression my grandpa used to always say. Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he won't be indebted to a brutal dictator. My grandpa was hardcore. Now you may have heard China is waiving the debt of some African countries. But those are basically only symbolic. They're small, zero-interest loans. China never provides true debt relief. However, there is pushback. Gradually, countries are realizing that Chinese loans lead to economic disaster, and you can't solve it by getting more emergency Chinese loans. The IMF is working on bailouts for several countries, including Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Remember, they're some of the biggest takers of Chinese loans. And you know how I said earlier that China requires its loans to be done in secret? Well, there are now signs that the IMF is pushing for full transparency from vulnerable nations in order to receive funding. The IMF is pressuring borrowers to disclose the details of their Belt and Road loans. For instance, Pakistan has already shared details with the IMF in consultation with the Chinese side. Obviously, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want all these details to see the light of day. China is about as transparent as a boulder in a tar pit at midnight during a lunar eclipse photographed by someone who didn't take the lens off the camera. But when these countries are ultimately forced to make the painful reforms they need to make and look to the West for money, a lot of dirty Chinese Communist Party secrets will be exposed. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army. These are the fans who support us directly through contributing either on Patreon or Locals. Today's question comes from Arubis on Locals. From what I'm reading, it is looking more and more that there is less of a chance that the PLA will just roll in and take Taiwan. It's sounding like a 3- or 4-pronged approach is more likely. Does this likely mean that there won't be an all-out hot war in Taiwan? Great question. The Chinese Communist Party wants Taiwan, no doubt about that. And they will do anything necessary to conquer it. But that doesn't mean they'll be stupid about it. Right now, the Communist Party knows it's not ready for a hot war that would involve the U.S. After all, Russia, supposedly one of the most powerful militaries in the world, has struggled in its invasion of Ukraine. And that's without other countries actively fighting on behalf of Ukraine. A war for Taiwan would likely bring in Japan, the U.S., Australia, possibly even India and other European countries. So the party will likely try to use short-of-war tactics. A few weeks ago, I did an episode about how China could use its military to essentially blockade Taiwan and starve them into surrendering. China might also try to invade the tiny island of Jinmen, located right next to the Chinese coast. Many of its residents are actually pro-communist China. Or they could try to take Pratas Island, Taiwan's island in the South China Sea. A war to defend the millions of people in the Taiwan mainland, sure, but it's possible some will feel a tiny island in the South China Sea probably isn't worth the expenditure of much blood and treasure. Then there's economic coercion, which the Communist Party has been trying to use on Taiwan for decades. So yes, I think it's very likely the party will exhaust every conceivable alternative to a hot war, until it feels the conquest of Taiwan is assured. Unless, of course, the party is on the verge of collapse, in which case a war might be just the distraction it needs. Thanks for your question and your support, Arubis. And thank you to everyone else as well who supports us directly through Patreon or Locals. Patreon is a way for you to contribute $1 or more per episode and interact with us. Locals is a social media platform that has a monthly subscription that also allows viewers to support us directly. The links to both are below. We really do rely mainly on viewer support for this show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.